So a little bit about me. That's me there. A little bit of history. I started as a programmer on mainframes. Yes, I'm that old. I've been waiting for technology to help marketing people. If you think about the 1980s, it was all about PCs, and in the 90s, it was all about software that was helping finance people. In the 2000s, it was all about ERP systems. And really, it was about 2010, a little bit before, that marketing suddenly got given all this technology. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Quick 30 seconds on the organization you're looking at. We're a marketing technology and a sales technology and a data analytics organization that happens to do marketing. So basically we're focused on the marketing and sales divisions within large organizations of all different shapes and sizes. And we're very, very data driven. Internationally, we have customers in 34 countries. We've got 8 offices around the globe, headquartered in Liverpool in the UK, if anybody's keen for maps or soccer, one of the two. There's just some of our customers. I'm not going to go through them. The important thing to take away from here is that we help organizations of all different shapes and sizes, from financial services to not-for-profits, government focus as well. So it's not just large enterprises, although we've listed some of our bigger customers on this slide. Here locally, and the people who are on the call, my 2 colleagues are from Sydney and Melbourne. So we happen to be talking to you from Australia today, but with experts all around the world. That last slide, incidentally, just proved that we are Marketo's Partner of the Year for last year and this. The 2 gentlemen that I'm going to introduce you to today are absolute experts in their field. So we'll get to Santi a little bit later on because he'll be presenting second out of the 2 gentlemen. Massive experience as far as social, advertising, marketing automation, etc. And Mina's got a wonderful career in taking fairly complex systems, working with large corporations such as News Corp, for example, and making them as easy and as simple to use as possible. That's the introductions done. This is the rest of the agenda. So I've got a little bit more to say to introduce the world of marketing, and then we've got Mina, who's going to show us or talk to us about one particular case study, one particular story where we're doing more with less and making things easier for that organization. And then Santi will take over and start being quite specific, actually. Now we're going to be quite specific here. This is an Adobe sponsored event, so we'll be talking a fair bit about Marketo, but really you can translate that into any other marketing automation tool, and also talking about all of the social stack. So it could be any technology, so hopefully you'll get lots from that as well. And then I'll come back and tie it all together and talk about attribution and some concluding statements and where to from here. So I enjoy, so I'll take a couple of minutes just to set the scene. I love reviewing some of my past presentations. I looked at this one from 2011, and I'm not sure if I believed it at the time, but Gartner was basically predicting, I'm hoping most people know who Gartner is. Gartner was predicting that by 2020, which is now, customers would be managing the vast majority of their relationships with organizations through technology. So without actually talking to a human. Well, guess what? They probably underestimated that, actually. I think the vast majority of organizations have their customers' journey starting well before they've ever spoken to anybody. And this was me in 1999. So my guys, you can't laugh at this. This was me. Life was a lot simpler. I was actually the marketing guy for a company called Borland, and they were a development tools company based in the US, multi-billion-dollar company, even in those days. And it was a lot easier then. Things like direct mail, fax, and personalized fax. You could put Dear Santi into the faxes as it was sent out. So think about that as a thumping great big mail merge. And then email obviously started to take over, but life in general was just a lot easier. And then over time, and this is a slide that I've borrowed, it's actually for the for residential real estate. Things just expanded. So you've got a lot more channels, and channels, even if you don't adopt them, they're certainly ones that you can't ignore, because this is where your customers and your prospects are all hanging out. Now, I'm not going to bore you with too much of this, but I do want to just go through a few slides. Scott Brinker, the martech technology landscape. It's a wonderful depiction of how complex the marketing world has actually become. So this was 2011. There was 150 or so technologies. Now, that's just one gentleman's list, but look what happened over that period of time, to the point where now in 2020, there's actually well more than 7,000. And funnily enough, they're still calling it the martech 5,000 for some unknown reason, but there's well over 10,000 technologies, in my opinion. And that's how complex our world actually is. And then just to magnify that a little bit further, in order for all those systems to start talking to each other, because of course they've all got their own individual data silos, we, as in the marketing people, then actually need to be able to integrate all of those tools together. So if you just pick on one piece of technology here, the application integration technology, trying to get these systems to talk to each other and trying to get your CRM to talk to your marketing automation tool, to talk to your e-commerce system, you've got another bunch of systems that will allow all of that data to be hooked together. And then, of course, what these technologies have done is make it easy so that it's not programmers that have to build this stuff anymore. That puts it back into the hands of the marketing people. And marketing people, even with my background as a programmer, aren't necessarily the ideal people, the ideally suited people to actually maintain and control all these different systems, even though it's quite easy to build these systems together. One further thing from Gartner, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, I would encourage you to go and have a look at it. I love it. Gartner put together what looks like a London Underground map, with the idea is that as you choose various of these, everything else goes grey, except for those areas in on the screen. And it really highlights the sort of activities that large organizations or any organization is trying to achieve, and how complex these systems actually are. And the point there being that the buyer is now completely in control. Going back to what Gartner was saying back in 2011, 85% of their interaction could be completely anonymous until they actually get to the point of buying. So in that process, you're going to have to work out their journey throughout your entire interaction with you, not just as a lead, but also as an ongoing customer, and how you manage and control all of that stuff. And by way of depiction, this we do a lot of new marketing technology builds for people. And an organization came to us not long ago and said, this is what we need. We have to have this on day one. And by the way, day two was 2 weeks later. We need all of this as well. So we need all of this stuff integrated. How do we go about doing all of that for those large organizations? So we'll talk to you about how we've managed to achieve some of those things. But the conclusion of my little bit here is, yeah, marketing is pretty complex. There's a lot of tools in that stack. Even if you haven't got an identified stack, just think about all the things that you're using on an ongoing basis as far as messaging is concerned. We're certainly not getting any more money, and COVID, there you go, it's the last time I'll use that word, has caused more complexity and uncertainty. And because there's a lot of martech involved and technology involved, we're basically putting technology in the hands of people who are not necessarily IT skilled. So we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do now is hand over to Mina. You can take the screen if you like, Mina, and we'll talk a bit about reducing the complexity and using a case study for an organization looking to rapidly increase its digital presence. So I'll hand over to you, Mina.
Thanks, Graham, and welcome everyone. It's great to have you with us today. When Graham and I were thinking about identifying the real gaps between where customers start and where they end when they're rapidly expanding their digital presence, it reminded me of a free event, and I'll go into that a little bit further. But I wanted to share a few things to spark you all to begin with. So far, 2020 has taught me a few things. The blurred backgrounds we often see don't mean you have poor eyesight. The capabilities of our microphones have limited and or expanded our ability to collaborate with each other. And more seriously, our efficiencies or what inefficiencies we have become far more transparent once we became separated from each other in the office space, in the collaborative space, if you deal with customers, if you're an agency. So to go back to the subject of today's presentation. I attended this session many years ago. It was a free event about achieving record growth in any business, and it was presented by a single and very enigmatic person in a flashy hotel in Sydney on a gigantic stage. He outlined the plan, which was to include social presence, a basic website with one contact form. Everything would be done lean with very minimal upfront payment. Whatever were deciding to sell would have to be a product that could be bundled up in a way where customers could self-serve for most of the buying journey, which would reduce our admin. And of course, we needed to have a registered business number. It was exciting. This whole presentation he gave was very inspiring, and there were about 1,000 people attending with me. They all had these notepads that he had kindly supplied to us earlier in the evening when we turned up, and they were furiously writing notes. Now, I stopped writing, not because of any profound, intelligent reason, but because individually, all the parts he was talking about, they all made sense. They were no-brainers, but I couldn't really pin one specific bullet point that would tie them all together. So it made writing anything down sort of just this really quick chicken scratch that at the end of the night would not make sense. Now, regardless of his intentions, if they were authentic or not, the part that made the biggest impact on me, and I guess this resonates with most businesses, is how many things we aim to solve for in an hour of time, or at least we try to. He, similar to what we do in our business, we attempt to simplify things to concepts we all know and have memorized. Things like keeping it simple, build it and they'll come, or be agile. Now, fast forward to today, and I find myself rethinking that event that I attended and wondering, out of the hundreds of extremely talented people that we meet day to day, be they in marketing, sales, content writers, business strategists, technical consultants, very few could accurately claim that the entire business they worked for was successful. Perhaps their own team was, and perhaps a division that they're part of was very successful. So the social division or the digital marketing division was very successful. But very few could say that the entire business they worked for was holistically successful. And I wondered why, after all these years and after all of the resources that we're given for free online. Now, being a sociology and ancient history graduate, I looked back, of course. And this is the one and only quote I'll give you today, which is Aristotle's, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." I promise I won't give up anymore. Simply stated, we can't do everything and we can't do the entire job. That's not to say that one person can't do it, but it's to say that going back to the presenter, he had a team of people underneath him that were hidden from us. So people handling Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of his channels, marketing, sales, operational, technical, all of those elements in his business were working in tandem with each other. And it wasn't just him. Even though the audience was beginning to believe we were graced by some sort of demigod. Now, indeed, he was successful. He had close to 1,000 inspired and very hopeful people in his room, each in various stages of success. I was surrounded by tradespeople, white-collar professionals, freelancers, consultants, and all he had to do was prey on their doubts and position himself as a perfect savior who would be able to take them to the next level. Now, let's do a really brief amount of mathematics. Let's just think about it. If the average success rate in marketing is 5%, and he had 1,000 attendees, he would have gotten 50 people attending, out of the attendees, paying $1,500 for a personalized consultation. That was his price point. Now, that would have made him $75,000. Across 2 sessions a day, presented 5 times a week in 3 major Australian cities, that's $750,000 for a product that just involves him consulting you in your current business. And let's be honest, it was going to be using pre-made PDFs that would be emailed to you. And those were only the attendees on the night, let alone think about those who he convinced via social media before or after the event. The point is, the whole of what we do is far more important, and all the components of our businesses have a far-reaching effect on the level of success we achieve. It isn't him on the stage, or the slides he was presenting, or the pre-event or post-event comms. It was everything together driving his ramped up digital platform that drove the possibility of closing the sale, increasing lifetime value and repeat business. Now, here's a live example. The challenge that was presented to us was that a business called Gingerbread Folk, who you can visit as gingerbreadfolk.com.au, had started small, like most other businesses, and their trajectory was quite common. After passing the first 1 or 2 years of organic growth and going through the burst of social media presence and automating some parts of the way they deliver their product. All this was well known, but there was now no way of tying it all together, and it was quickly spiraling out of control. The business users inside this customer were all struggling to deliver scalable campaigns year on year, month on month, that did not burn up valuable resources just to maintain the normal amount of sales they expected to break even. There were an overwhelming number of failure points in the processes, in the data and tech stacks, and in the fact that people were actually key components to that failure. If someone was sick, if someone was busy, everything went to a standstill. And the business users worked extremely hard, but it was not smart or efficient. Now, the solution was to take all these moving parts and manage them that were being managed manually, bring them all under one roof, really look at them individually. What purpose do they serve? And pick and choose the ones that would make it into the future, that had scalability. And one of the first ones that came up was there was no way for this business to track everything in one place. There was no source of truth. So the chosen CRM for this customer specifically was Salesforce, but this could be Dynamics, it could be a number of other CRMs. We then set about the common channels of marketing and reduced the bespoke reactive campaigns. Instead of the business constantly having a knee-jerk reaction to the month-on-month requirements, the upcoming events, the email batch and blasts, we mapped what the customer journey is ideally for this customer and their own customers, and started to generate channels and marketing programs that suit those journeys, that they, as subject matter experts, because they know their business, that they sensed were the right channels for them. This resulted in scalable and repeatable campaigns for each tier of their customers and each revenue channel. Immediately, we saw a reduction of the lift that each time a marketing campaign had to be done. The implementing solutions to handle inbound requests, this freed up the internal team to not have to answer so many phone calls, not have to answer so many emails. We established rules and segmentation rules around which data is used to target which sorts of audience. Overall, this increased the conversion and lifetime value of each lead without, and this is probably the key thing for this specific customer, because their manager was very, very adamant to not lose the personality of the brand through over automation. So let's take a look at what this looked like. So, and this may resonate with a number of you. Here you have the business user, this white character inside of a black circle, and surrounded surrounding them is a third-party pick and pack system. They have their website, which has a WooCommerce platform. All of these had to push out CSVs, which would then be managed by the human component of the business. They have to perform some sort of black magic, a bunch of VLOOKUPs, a lot of filtration, to then decide on saving and producing a CSV, which would then be used to mail merge into a number of systems: Word for communications, Outlook for email comms, PDFs for invoices. All of this entire amount of work was purely to communicate to a sixth of the base that they had. That is the maximum capacity the human component in this business could handle. So if the base was 6,000 people, they could only ever really deal with 1,000 at any one time. Compounding this is that there was a MailChimp system sitting outside that could be given a CSV at any point to do a batch blast, as most of you would know. But while there was reporting coming back into the team to understand how many opens, how many were delivered, how many were clicked, there was no correlation between those clicks and purchases, those clicks and whether people purchased a second or third time. Furthermore, any communications directly from the customer base, so if Joe Blogs emailed back into the business with a question or a request, that was not trackable anywhere. It had no connection to any other previous communications. Think of it as being round and round, rinse, repeat, constantly over and over. And as you can see, there are silos everywhere. The online shop doesn't feed the lead data into the marketable base. The tools all the tools being used require a human intervention, management, and oversight to ensure quality control and timing, because there is no way of of tracking what happens to a customer from go to woe. And at the end of the day, a human can only do so much. This business was only, as I mentioned, able to actively market to 1/6 of their address book. As you can imagine, it burnt up a lot of energy. It created a lot of frustrations inside that business. Where did we go? So as much as they wanted to start from scratch, it was not necessary to strip everything out and start again. There are no bad tools in ramping up digital channels, but there are tools that are better for your business and requirements. In this case, we've taken the parts that worked well, WooCommerce, the website, the third-party pick and pack. The website is lead generator, and we brought them all together through a common glossary and agreed methodology. This was further augmented by their presence online into platforms such as Instagram and Facebook. And here are the results. Here's the new roadmap, or the what do you want to call it? Flowchart. That's probably the best word. Still WooCommerce is going into Xero. Xero is handling all the invoicing. It's communicating into Salesforce, as I mentioned, the single source of truth. In this case, this customer went with Marketo. Marketo is handling all the outbound comms, all of the lead generation questions and answers through segmentation rules. It is also tracking people's digital footprint across the website. So anyone who is known or anonymous is also being tracked. It's also handling Instagram and Facebook lead generation. And the vital parts for this customer, so all this excited me as the tech, but from the customer's perspective, they now not only could handle the entire base, but they also were able to increase the base 3 times while still being able to handle everyone. The best part for me as a consultant was that I had removed the human aspect from being a bottleneck. And I think some of you may also appreciate that there are no CSVs at all being extracted here, which is also a big plus. Now, I had a customer who I presented this to a few weeks ago as a case study, and they said to me, "Oh, that's amazing. Now, how much headcount did they have?" Or they were trying to resource the right amount of people into a team to be able to transition into a model similar to this. And the business I referred to a few times in this presentation made a compelling argument that ramping up your digital channels does not necessarily mean you need more human resource. So that single black icon that I used with the person in it, it's actually equated to a small family out in the Blue Mountains in Sydney. And actually, it's just one person doing this whole thing. So rather than remove the human element from the business, instead we gave this person the opportunity to thrive in what humans do best, which is building human relationships, and leave the rest to the channels to handle. Not set and forget, but rather set the right rules, position them in a way that suits the business, revisit them as necessary and tweak them. It's not a set and forget, as I said. But speaking of a channel that's gotten a real workout in 2020, I think I'll hand it over to Santi and to Graham first. If there's any questions, by all means, feel free to use the Q&A, which should be at the bottom of your screen. Thanks, guys.
You're muted, GP.
Thank you. There's a message from 2020. Santi, I think if you take over the screen,
Sure.
I think the next slide is the agenda. So I just wanted to introduce and do a segue into you. For time, I'll do it quite quickly. If you move to the next slide, that would be helpful. And that's what Mina was talking about there, was all of the different capabilities and everything that we've automated. So the next slide, I think, Santi, should identify that area that you're going to start talking about now, which is, yep, one back, please. So if you go one back. Yeah, that one there, which is Facebook, Instagram, and basically the web. So with that in mind, I'll hand over, and basically we're going to go into a lower level detail here and start talking about some specifics about how social can be integrated into your platforms. Over to you, Santi.
Thanks, GP, and thanks everyone for joining. So yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit today about how you can ramp up your digital channel so you can do more with less, how you can automate your digital acquisition. And I wanted to use an example that everyone can relate to, which is the webinar that you are looking at right now. So I wanted to just explain how for this particular webinar and for the marketing campaign that came with this webinar, how we combined all of these different elements of digital marketing seamlessly and with a minimum amount of effort. So that's content marketing, social advertising. We also did optimized search. We used audiences, custom audiences, lead generation efforts. We did a bit of A/B testing. We used a UTM strategy on top of it all, and that fed into our analytics. And then at the very end, we're also going to do a little bit of lead nurturing for this campaign. So just to get started very quickly, content marketing, it's obviously a very important part of, it's a very easy way to attract people. It's probably the best way to attract people nowadays, because you really have to think about, these people are giving you their email address or their contact details. What are you going to be giving them in exchange for that information? Hosting a webinar is obviously a very easy way to generate content with relatively little effort. And if you record and upload the webinars that you host, then that allows you to just keep that piece of content online so that it can keep generating interest after the webinar has passed. This webinar is being recorded and we will be uploading it, of course, for people to be able to watch it afterwards. Other typical examples would include white papers, sweepstakes, and surveys. So the kind of things that you can generate and ask for an email address in exchange. So ideally, your content would be evergreen. This is a word that we hear a lot. Evergreen basically means that it's something that will continue being relevant to your audience in the future. And evergreen content gives you an advantage, which is that you can use SEO to provide a steady stream of interest. Now, SEO is a bit of a slow burner strategy. SEO normally takes 3 to 6 months. It would take you when you're starting from zero for you to be able to hit your SEO goals in search engines. So if you generate a piece of content that is still going to be relevant 6 months, 12 months from now, then that's an ideal use case for you to be able to use SEO to keep generating interest and keep generating volume of traffic on it. You can also generate interest, obviously, via paid or earned media channels, such as email, social media, paid social, and etc. Now, ideally, again, I've mentioned this, your content should be relevant for your target audience. If you're trying to attract an audience of digital marketers, then maybe don't do a webinar on baking. You should be maybe speaking about something that is very relevant to your target audience, of course. It should be timely, especially if you're paying for the media. So for example, if you're going to be doing a webinar for something that is related to the end of fiscal year, maybe it's related to tax returns, then maybe don't pay for advertising about it in the month of October. You should be aiming for the content to be as timely as possible for your target audience. And then you should also make it varied. I've seen this a lot where a content marketing strategy that is only focusing on one specific bit of content, and that is the content that is going to, it's going to be the end all be all, and it's going to be the bit of content that is going to generate the most amount of interest. But you never really know if a bit of content will generate the interest in your audience until the content is actually out there. So just try and make it varied, try and make as many pieces of content as you can. This is one piece of the marketing puzzle that is still a little bit hard to automate. I'll move on to the online advertising. So you can use your existing customer data to boost your paid efforts. So you don't have to keep your existing CRM information in a silo as opposed to your sort of paid audiences. You can actually use something like Marketo to boost your paid efforts with paid audiences. There's a few common ways to do this. Custom audiences will be your generic type of just uploading your audience A into a different platform and just replicating that audience across. So for example, if you have an audience you're sending an email to, you can just replicate that same audience into a platform such as Facebook or LinkedIn and just get in touch with them with the same bit of content across those two different channels. You can also save some money by using exclusions. So that's to say, if you are targeting an audience and that audience has already converted to your webinar, so say someone has already signed up to your webinar, you can upload the list of people who have already signed up to your webinar, and you can exclude them from your marketing efforts. So basically, you're not spending any more advertising dollars on people who have already done whatever it is that you're asking them to do. Lookalike audiences are in fashion and for a good reason. So a lookalike audience is basically Facebook, LinkedIn, or Google grabbing a target audience that you upload into those platforms and just basically generating a completely new audience that is the audience that looks the most like the audience that you have just uploaded. So the Google brain or the Facebook brain or the LinkedIn brain will look at that audience and will basically generate a very similar all new audience for you to be able to target. And this is one of the most powerful audience features that you can leverage nowadays in these paid channels. So I'll jump into the platforms right now so that I can show you how you can automate this process and how you can not only make this faster and leaner and more effective, but you can also just remove the CSV component out of it. So that means removing a lot of the human error and also just to stop sharing confidential data. If you are working with a third-party agency, if you're working and sending them CSVs that include your most confidential and your most important customer data, then this is a way to actually sidestep that and push the audience information straight from your platform, from your marketing automation platform or from your CRM into your paid platform. So for example, this is a Marketo. This is what this looks like in Marketo. I have created 2 different smart lists in Marketo, and I have defined my audience as, again, this is specifically for this webinar, anyone who is in Australia, New Zealand, or Singapore, and whose job title contains the 2 keywords, marketing or digital. So I'm basically just looking for anyone in our database that is from either of these countries and that has any of these titles in their job title. And all I need to do to just push these audiences into Facebook or LinkedIn or Google via Marketo is clicking list actions, send to ad network, and I can just choose LinkedIn, Facebook, or Google. This was a particularly LinkedIn heavy campaign, so I would just go LinkedIn and click next. And it's going to ask me which audience I want to push this into, if I have already created my audience in LinkedIn, or I can also just create a new audience from here. There's also a couple options that I can choose. I can add leads to an audience from here, or I can also use this to remove leads from a LinkedIn, Facebook, or Google audience. Now, if I go update, it's going to do that. It normally takes a few minutes, so I have already done this in advance. I'll show you what that looks like on LinkedIn. So this is the created audience on LinkedIn. You can see that this audience is ready for me to target. Now, if I want to create a lookalike from this audience, all I need to do is just simply click here. Sorry, guys, I'll move you around. And I can simply go, oh, I have to move you a little bit more, create lookalike. So it's as simple as clicking that, and then it's going to ask me for a name, and it's going to ask me for a target audience, and then just hit create, and LinkedIn just does its magic and generates the lookalike audience from it. I have also created a second exclusions smart list here, and that's basically anyone who has already signed up for this webinar. As I have said, I don't want to keep spending advertising dollars on someone who has already done what I have asked them to do. And at the same time, it's a pretty bad customer experience when you have already signed up to a webinar and you keep getting advertising about it. So same thing here, anyone who has already filled out the ramp up your digital channels form, I can basically just push that into LinkedIn as I just showed you. And I can use that as an exclusion. So that's the kind of audiences and online advertising slide. Now, what do we do with these audiences? So the advertising itself kind of takes two forms nowadays when it comes to lead generation. You can either send the advertising traffic into a landing page with a form. So the benefit would be that you have a little bit more room there to actually explain what your value proposition is. And that tends to create more qualified leads. So some of you might be familiar with option A, because this is our Marketo landing page, including a Marketo form. And obviously we have, just a very nice looking page. This is a Marketo landing page template as well, and a form that we can use to get people to get in touch with us. So that's sort of option one. This tends to generate better qualified leads in this case. And then the other option, which is becoming more common nowadays and very prevalent, is just to capture the lead information directly on the social platforms. And you can do that on Facebook or on LinkedIn, on Instagram as well, via lead generation forms. So the benefit is that these minimize friction because people are already browsing through Facebook or LinkedIn. So they don't even have to leave the platform that they're at to sign up to this form. So you tend to have a higher conversion rate here. If you've never seen what these ones look like, let me just show you. It's right under there. So if I can, yeah. I have created this one just for this particular webinar. So this is an example. It doesn't look exactly like the one that you would have seen on LinkedIn. But this is what a LinkedIn lead gen form looks like. And if you see, when I just click sign up, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying directly in LinkedIn. And a lot of these fields, all of them actually are pre-filled. So it's so quick for me to just hit submit and then move on. So as you can see, this is very frictionless. And of course, it's going to generate a lower cost per acquisition for you and a higher conversion rate. So those are your two options. One gives you more qualified leads normally, and the other one would give you a higher conversion rate and lower cost leads. You should be A/B testing this, and this is what we did for this campaign. Just A/B test both ways of acquisition and test which one works best for each piece of content, which one works best for each channel, and which one works best for each audience. Don't take anything for granted. A/B test everything and just reach the optimal solution for your particular marketing campaign. Now, finally, attribution, reporting, and optimization. This is the way how you wrap all of this up and how you can attribute ROI to your marketing efforts, how you can close the reporting loop, and how you can eventually iterate on your marketing campaigns. You need to pay special attention to your reporting setup, and you need to do this before the fact. You need to do this before you have actually run your marketing campaigns. And for this, UTMs are your friend. So we have UTM'd basically the whole process here. And there's two things to understand here in terms of our reporting setup. Google Analytics is what we do for web analytics, and this one supports UTMs out of the box. So that's a great plus. But it does have one thing against it, which is the data here is anonymized. So let me just show you what a typical analytics report looks like. Most of you might be familiar with this. Analytics will tell me that 46% of the traffic came through social, 22 came from referrals, 12% came from display, and so on and so forth. What analytics cannot tell me is if John Smith came from social, referral, or display. This is completely anonymized. Now, Marketo will offer me a different side of the coin. I have created this report in Marketo that I have hidden the first, last name, and email addresses from this view, just so that I'm not showing you, our customer information. But this is the type of information that you can actually get from Marketo. So Marketo will be able to tell me that my record ID 1047819 came in from the B2B source, and that's a name that I have defined in my UTM naming convention. So that's the benefit of using Marketo and analytics in conjunction. There's no beating analytics in terms of its web analytics features, but Marketo can actually tell you where that specific person came from, which specific link they clicked. And that's a really powerful feature from an attribution perspective, of course. That's me. Over to you again, JP.
Thank you. For time, Santi, if you can just stay on your presentation, I think, and then I'll just ask you to nudge forward a little bit. Can you move on to the next one? Yeah, so I wanted to bring it all together. And thank you, Santi. I can see a few questions coming in as to whether people will get the slide deck, and the answer is yes. We'll provide the slides as well as this recording of this session by the time it's close of business here today. We're normally pretty fast at doing that. Just moving on to the next slide, if that's all right, Santi, and thank you for your contribution there. It's always interesting to see how many people really stick around for the technology bit, and I think you've done a tremendous job there. So in conclusion, we know that marketing is complex. Budgets certainly aren't being increased. So how do we do more with less? And our focus has been on what we call the 5 pillars for years. And so if you go back to the gingerbread folk case study, move on to the next slide for me. And next one. I think you need to hit the mouse, so scroll down. Yeah. these 5 pillars here. So what we're very used to doing is focusing on the people, the process, the technology that we've been talking about thus far, be it Marketo, be it Salesforce. That's what we happen to be using for some of our customers. But whatever technology you're used to using there, you need to embrace that and look at how you're going to do things better and faster, and then accurately work out how you're going to integrate that data. And that's the place that we feel is the most likely you're going to get the most sensible return to be enabling you to do more with less. If you automate at that point and you have that information pulling in automatically into your nurture stream or into powering your marketing automation tool to go into the right nurtures, to go into the right personalized one-to-one communication, and pulling that information from all of your social channels. And all of that sounds easy, doesn't it? And Santi made it look easy, but it takes a bit of time to do. It takes a bit of analysis, takes a bit of business requirement definition, and then it takes a bit of execution and testing. So my next slide here is that one. I kind of like this one in that I actually only saw it this morning and I pulled it all together. So are you too busy to improve? And we find this is one of those mantras, I think, as people get so busy, sometimes they're not looking at the tools that could actually make their lives a whole heap easier. Now, when you add COVID into this whole world, next slide, please, Santi. When you add COVID into this world, what is it that we can do in order to improve? Now, here are 10. Remember I said I like looking back at things? Here are actually 10 interesting things that happened during the recession of 2008. Now, we still don't know what the new startups and the new technologies are going to be that are going to come out of COVID, but we know that that's highly likely to happen. Certain organizations are going to expand, certain organizations are clearly going to shrink, and some might even die. But the technologies that are supporting all of the marketing people just is not slowing down. Now, with that in mind, the next slide, Santi, just talks about a couple of things for next steps, because I'm cognizant of time here. We've got some more reading. We've got a revenue attribution white paper, which we will send out later on today. We've actually got a 5-step process as well, which is our attribution accelerator. Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to answer all of the questions. And if you do have a bunch of questions about integrating in with social and integrating in with other systems, then by all means, come back to us and ask. But what this will do for you is provide an infrastructure that will say, this is how we're going to tie all this stuff together and measure what's being successful. So we can measure the A/B tests. We can manage what UTMs are working properly. We can manage all of those different systems and then make sensible decisions about what to put more effort into. Something else that I'm just cognizant of, we gave one case study here for a relatively small organization, Gingerbread Folk. We've just released another case study of a larger organization, that would be Uber Eats. So we'll send more information about that. And that case study just happened with the Adobe Marketo folks again today. So with that, I'm going to just highlight the next slide for me, Santi, and then I'll close. I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for coming along. This 5-step process you'll hear a bit more about as we discuss with you what we feel as though the next steps could be, if we can be of assistance along with our friends at Adobe. But for now, thank you very much for coming. I hope you've had a good session. It's been helpful for you. And as I say, the next step will be an email from us with all of the information that people have requested. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day wherever you are. And join me in giving a virtual round of applause, at least to Mina and to Santi. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys. And we will get back to you regarding any questions you've put into the Q&A.